The proceeding is currently in private.
Order, and welcome everybody to this meeting of the Work and Pensions Select Committee and for our evidence session with the ministers, who we're very grateful to for joining us this morning to conclude the evidence for our inquiry on safeguarding vulnerable claimants. Mims, can I ask you to just tell us briefly who you are, together with your colleague?
Yeah, good morning, Sir Stephen. Good morning, committee, and thank you for having us. So I'm delighted to be joined by Minister for the Lords, Viscount Younger, who will be giving some of your responses this morning. Liz, or Elizabeth, do you want to just tell the committee your formal title and what you get involved in?
Yeah, hi, I'm Liz Fairburn. I'm the Customer Experience Director at DWP.
And over here, Preeta, who I've known for a long time, very much on the ground in terms of operations. So Preeta, do you want to tell the committee about you?
Morning everyone, I'm Preeta Ramachandran. I'm the Area Director for the South of England for Universal Credit. So that's all the job centres and service centres across the South of England.
Thank you.
Shall I introduce myself? I'm James Younger, Lord Younger. I've been in the department for just over a year. And I am the Under Secretary of State and also the Minister for Lords, meaning that everything in the department that needs to be done in the Lords is undertaken by me.
Well, thank you all for being here. So the first question that I want to put to you is this, that many witnesses have said to us in the inquiry that DWP should have a statutory duty to safeguard vulnerable benefit claimants. We've heard how local authorities willingly embraced such a duty in legislation not long ago. Would DWP welcome a statutory duty?
Chair, good morning. And as I say, I think we're really pleased as ministers to give evidence this morning and put on the record. I've just got a few opening remarks, which leads into that, if I may. Put on the record that we at DWP really do care very much about supporting the most vulnerable in society, and that it has been an incredibly unhelpful narrative around DWP's treatment of vulnerable people. And I think this gives us an opportunity for those watching to hopefully see that that isn't roundly correct. And that I do encourage members of the committee to see what we do day in, day out in our local job centres, our service centres, our youth hubs, around how our frontline staff feel about what they do and how much they care and the consideration that they give in their work. I think what we do is provide training and guidance for all our customer-facing staff, so that they're adaptable for all the different scenarios that they may be faced with. If we think as a constituency MPs, the surgeries we get, it's a very wide-ranging what comes in front of us. So as DWP, our work doesn't stop there. I think we're always looking to improve our processes and update our guidance, and that comes around our complex needs. If I turn specifically to the safeguarding duty, I think the primary function, I think James would agree with us on this, of the department is around the administration of benefits, paying the right amount at the right time, but not just because we pay benefits to people doesn't mean that we're not focused on that vulnerability that may be in front of us, that we do not have a legal duty of care, but it doesn't mean we don't care. And I think that's really important for people watching to understand. We have layers of support in place to make sure the department can carry out that core function and provide claimants who are vulnerable with the right support, but recognise that in some areas that improvements can be made. So we're always happy as a learning department with varying complex needs of our caseloads to be ready to manage them.
Would the department welcome the duty being made statutory or resist it?
I think so. If we take what you're referring to, I think we've got complex needs training that's out there that complements our current learning offer and allows participants to have that tailored customer service, and includes new trauma-informed approach to training and autism accreditation. I think in terms of a statutory duty, we work with people who have statutory duties, and what we see is our route through our tailored approach, through getting to know people with complex needs, that we send them through to those with the specialities and the understanding of those statutory duties to be discharged. As I say, we're the Department of Work and Pensions that administers benefits and helps people into work, but of course deals with complex case needs. But I think that specific duty is something that I think, in essence, with such a large department, although some people, clinicians and others, have those duties, and we work with local authorities and others, as you describe, I think it's, for us, it's about signposting to that support. I don't know, Liz, if you want to add to that.
Let me pick that point up, because one of the things that we've been told is that the department doesn't always consistently follow its safeguarding policies. As you said, we're aware that there are policies, but the implementation of them seems patchy. And I wonder whether legislation around those current policies might help, for example, make sure that people are referred elsewhere when there's a safeguarding concern, when it's appropriate to make such a referral.
Well, I think we've got the layers of support for those with complex needs. That can include safeguarding to other agencies who have those duties, NHS, social services, third-party organisations.
The concern that's been raised is that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does, but not always.
But I think the solution of the statutory duty that the committee is reaching for can be addressed through our continuing investment through training, guidance, development, and links to other government departments and organisations who have that duty. Liz, do you want to just draw into that?
Yeah, exactly that. So I think we are a big organisation. We are working really hard to embed the tools that I know that this committee are familiar with, and we've talked to you about them before. And I think we need to do that. Of course, there are occasions where we don't always get it right for customers, and we know that, and we really take that seriously and we learn from that. But what we are doing is we're on a mission to push these tools to make sure everybody does know what they are and does apply them.
Might not a statutory duty help?
So my personal opinion on this is that I think if we put a statutory duty in, that is a big undertaking for the department, when actually I think we need to embed the tools that we've already got. I'm not sure that's the right tool to get the right outcomes. I think continuing to refer to organisations that are specialist and that have got that safeguarding responsibility is the right approach for us as a department.
Can I ask you this? The written evidence you gave us refers to the framework to support vulnerable claimants. Can you just tell us what that is? Is it something that's written down? Could it be published? What
so I think it's framework with a small f, and I think it refers to the infrastructure that we've got. And we've talked lots of times about this, and I think Minister Davies has already referenced that we've got this tiered approach. We see it as everybody's responsibility in DWP to take the care of our customers.
Is it written down?
So it's not. So we could share something with you that would summarise the high level, and I'm happy to do that.
Okay, that would be helpful, I think. Thank you. Sir Desmond Swain.
The accusation is that you don't do enough to find out what vulnerabilities people have and what additional support they will need as a consequence. I suppose my prejudice is that it's not unreasonable to rely on people to tell you that so that you can help them. But we've heard that there are many people who are incapable or reluctant to share their vulnerabilities, and that therefore they're not getting the support that they should get. How could you be more proactive in actually finding out about people's vulnerabilities in order to give them the support that they need?
Yeah, and I think that the Chair alluded to that at the start, which is why I was trying to say that we have a trusted relationship, a tailored approach. Actually, many times that disclosures and understanding is made between our work coaches or our disability employment advisors, our visiting officers, because of exactly that trusted relationship, which then can lead to the suitable signposting. So I think we empower staff to notice things, to be approachable. Preeta's talked about it before. If people are dishevelled when they come to us. They're clearly not able to keep themselves, clean. There's things going on. You can pick that up. An experienced work coach who's embedded in that community with their claimants and their customers will be able to do that. And we're always looking for ways to highlight that. So we've got in the UC build an ability for a colleague to record additional support that's needed and signposts from care leavers to forces leavers, ex-offenders, people who are homeless or at risk of being homeless. We've got the Ask for Annie and the J9 around domestic abuse. Those who may have limited digital access or no digital skills, we've got our social tariffs and our engagement through the Flexible Support Fund to help with that. If people have difficulty communicating in English or if they need BSL, obviously with different claimants who need ESOL, particularly with Ukrainians and others, we've been able to reach out and support people with that. And of course, drug and alcohol misuse and impact there, where particular programmes and interventions are there. So these are all relevant questions for our work coaches, and multiple options can be chosen if they apply to an individual customer. And that's why I'm really pleased about the work that we're doing around trauma-informed approach as well. I saw that for myself just recently in Hastings. I think Preeta's itching to come in on this one, so Desmond, and James.
I was just going to say, I think for our work coaches, it's that building up of trust. So a number of interventions that we have with customers, they might come in and start to talk about debt. Actually 2 or 3 appointments later, we find out there may be something to do with alcohol or drug dependency. So for me, what I've seen, so I went to Gosport last week, which is one of our health model offices. Someone came in and started to talk about debt. Actually, over time, what they disclosed to us is that they had an alcohol problem, and just on the safeguarding duty we were then able to refer them to NHS England that has a peer mentoring service. So for us it's about our work coaches being able to signpost to organisations that have that safeguarding duty, but it's seeing that relationship build up over time, being able to build trust with the customer, and then obviously that's when they disclose, or as the Minister said, they might disclose as soon as they come in. So our work coaches are really good at picking up changes in behaviours, changes in appearance. So all of this over their own experience comes in. And I've seen this over a number of job centres that I've been to across the south of England.
Could I just add in, much has been said, but I think what's crucial here is the quality of the DWP frontline operations. And I think this is perhaps the gist of your question. I think that's really important. And I think the committee will know that we have the 6-point plan. We also have a 2-day mental health training for all coaches. And of course, we recruit quite a lot. Maybe we can talk about recruitment later. But I think it's really important that those who come on board are properly trained, which we believe they are, to deal with vulnerability. And we have also advanced customer support. So we have 30+ advanced customer support senior leaders. Again, it's all part of the layers of support that are needed to look at the highly complex differences in terms of the vulnerabilities concerned.
The Ombudsman told us, and I quote, that the DWP did not do all that it could to recognise the vulnerability of a claimant due to their circumstances and adapt its actions in accordance. Do you ask enough? How about putting on the application form for universal credit a space for people to list any circumstances that might make them might give rise to need for additional support?
Yeah, I think that's a fair challenge. I think that's where the trauma-informed approach comes in, where, again, with the signposting that Preeta just described to external partners who will have the right help and advice for those customers and for those that need support and are struggling. I think that's really key, because we're seeing a lot of customers it's time sensitive. As Preeta says, sometimes it will take a little bit of a trusted relationship before people will actively open up. So the trauma-informed approach is a way of trying to avoid and mitigate risk, but creating also a safe and empowering environment for all. And I think it's particularly key for those vulnerable customers who may have significant experience of trauma and adversity. And that's where the 6 key pillars of safety, trustworthiness, choice, empowerment, collaboration and cultural consideration come into play. And we've been learning from other people in Scotland and others about how do you get that conversation going, how do you keep something a safe and engaging space, but actually learn how to do this better. So we've got some innovation hubs in East Kilbride, Porthcawl, Stratford and Worsley, and we're linking with the local services to make sure that this is a welcoming, engaging place. Also, Preeta mentioned debt, where people can say more that's going on. But, you know, are you going to divulge to someone within your first 10-minute appointment everything that's going on? It doesn't. It's about building that trust and then giving our work coaches both the network and the empowerment of what to do with that information. And for example, in your own constituency, Sir Desmond, you know, we're working actively with job fairs through the Citizen Advice and other partnership organisations for those people with more complex needs to be able to be helped if they're further away from the labour market. So, you know, all of this is, I think, about manufacturing and an understanding that coming to see us can help you access what you need, and it may not be what we have, but we have things like the homelessness covenant and other areas where, for example, working with partners and others, we can help people progress. We might not be the right, perfect, responsive agency, but we have those links in our local communities for the people with those statutory duties that do.
Thank you very much. Nigel Mills.
This all sounds perfectly wonderful. I suspect the evidence we've had is it's not quite what people experience. So could you just talk me through how you would support? I mean, I suspect the most vulnerable claimants never actually come and see someone in a job centre because they won't be required to look for work. So say I'm very vulnerable and I apply for PIP and I apply and get on the no work-related activity group. How do you make sure that I've got the right benefits and I'm not just being turned down because I got the form slightly wrong or I couldn't face an assessment or something?
Yeah, I think, Nigel, you're right. I mean, you know, we could sit here and paint a perfectly rosy picture, but we know not every community in every area is a perfectly rosy picture. But equally, I don't think to say that DWP is getting everything wrong is fair. So there's a middle way that we need to find here. And what I think is really important, which I tried to get to the chair at the start, is to make sure that people know that we're a learning, understanding organisation, and ultimately if people divulge or engage with us, they're going to have a much better experience than if they don't. So we've got our DWP visiting service, which is a national service that provides additional face-to-face support to our customers who cannot access the department's services in any other way. We've currently got 480 visiting officers with further national recruitment underway, and we're getting up to hopefully 700. If they have a general safeguarding concern about the customer, they then can refer directly to the local authority safeguarding team, use the district provision tool that they have to link either to adult or child social services with any welfare concerns. And if during a visit the visiting officer needs to discuss wider services, they're able to do that. And they link to our advanced customer support senior leaders, which with support work with those agencies, which could be local authority, police and other localised support networks. And I think this is something we're very much growing. We've got, for example...
So why did you stop face-to-face appointments for help to claim?
Well, help to claim, you can have the face-to-face appointments through the Citizens Advice Service, and they are our link. And for example, in my local library, whether you're trying to get support through the Household Support Fund or others, that's how you can have that conversation. I think, as we've discussed, not always people want to come straight to us.
So 2 years ago you stopped the face-to-face and help to claim. Have I misremembered that?
We have other ways of reaching people, whether it's YouTube and other engaging ways to help with access, as I say, through Household Support Fund or indeed the Help to Claim service. But Liz, I feel you're itching to say more on this one.
Yeah, so I think the point here is that we can flex the right solution to the right person, and the visiting officers are a really great example actually of where we can send them into the homes of our most vulnerable customers to support them. And Minister Davies is right, we're expanding the numbers of those up to about that 700 mark, and that's to support the move to UC. We recognise that transition might be tricky for some customers, and we're going to deploy additional resource to do that. So it is we heard this week from one of our visiting officers who is a vulnerable person themselves, and the great work that they do to support some of our most vulnerable customers. And that's personalised. We reference there the district provision tool, and that's a really great example of how we focus on localised services. So this isn't a national thing. This is something that's specific to that local area, and we know where the support is so that we can start to signpost.
Yeah. Whether that's domestic violence or other support.
Yeah.
So the Citizens Advice and the Help to Claim service since 2019 has helped 900,000 people with their claim. So I do think whether it's the free phone number, digital channels, web chat, Help to Claim, coming into a job centre, we've always got people, Preeta, waiting at the doors to help people to be signposted. So I don't think there's any barrier of helping the most vulnerable out.
So can we go back to the scenario I gave you? I'm a claimant with serious mental health issues. I'm really anxious. I need to apply for PIP, and I want to apply for universal credit to be in the no work requirement group. So I ring up and you send me a form. I fill the form in and put those things on. The only contact I'll probably get is when I get my assessment notification. I have to do a telephone assessment or go in person, and then I get a decision letter. And what should the process be for somebody who, you can probably tell from the form, may not fill that form in particularly well, or be really worried about going for that assessment, because they won't actually be speaking to any of your staff at any point in that whole journey, will they, unless somebody
they may have an appointee or an advocate to help them as well. Preeta, in terms of practicalities, is this something you see a lot?
Yeah, so in PIP we do have vulnerable customer champions that would help those people. So if we did find out they needed advanced customer support, actually the vulnerable customer champion would help them throughout the process.
So how do you
and as
find
the Minister...
out?
Well, they would have to disclose that, but we do advocate having an appointee, because obviously the nature of PIP is that a lot of our customers will be vulnerable, so they would have someone to support them in the application. I think there's other examples as well. So outreach, for example, we go to GP surgeries, we're working there. We're in some of the most deprived areas in community centres, so we send our work coaches there. So it's not all just face-to-face in the job centre either.
And that's why we set up the network of youth hubs, which we grew pre and during COVID, particularly for young people, the under-25s most at risk of long-term unemployment. Very often it was because being in a job centre wasn't the right place for them with their complex needs. There might be homelessness issues, trouble at home, debt, substance issues. Again, that is a safe place for young people, again with those local partnerships, for us to do those warm handovers to the people who need their extra support. So I think there is a way in, and I certainly wouldn't want anybody watching this to think that they would be left on their own, which is why we're rightly looking at appointees and making sure that that's strengthened. Liz, that's something you're directly doing at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, so appointees is a great example, actually. I know that becoming a learning organisation is a key topic for the committee, and appointees is a really great example of demonstrating this. So through the work that our advanced customer support teams do, and through the work that we do with our internal process reviews, our IPRs, we know that we can strengthen and improve our appointee offering, even though it is good. We've been recognised for that being the case. But we've kicked off some work. We want to enable our customers to live their lives, and to your point, we want to be able to, support them to do that. And we recognise that sometimes they need additional help, and that is where the appointee can come in. So we're looking at how we can speed up the process, but at the same time protect our customers from, potential financial abuse. And we've run several dedicated pain point workshops with our corporate acting bodies. So the brilliant thing about those was that it brought in lived experience, so the people who were in those corporate acting bodies have also acted as appointees, and they can also see what our customers are experiencing. And throughout this year we'll be deploying lots of different things to enable a much better appointee system. So we're going to include a decision tree. Appointee is not the only answer. It could be that a power of attorney is required, or it could be that somebody just wants somebody to speak to them in that moment to help them through a particular process, and how we can do that. Apologies.
So are you looking at, in your review, meaning I can make one appointee, one notification covering all benefits?
Yes.
Are you looking at whether I can only nominate them to do certain things, but I can keep some responsibility myself?
Yeah, so we're looking, so to your point on the solution there, what we want to build by the end of this year is a digital solution where a customer can put an appointee on, and all people in DWP will be able to see that appointee. We're also looking at the ability to bring on a second appointee, because we recognise sometimes their current appointee can't act on their behalf. They may have gone away, they may have sadly passed away, and we recognise then that they need a second appointee. At the minute, there might be a gap while we onboard a new appointee, so we're trying to look at how we can do that concurrently. We're also looking at how we can temporarily suspend appointees. So with conditions like seasonal affective disorder, for example, it might be only certain months in the year that the customer needs that additional support. We want to enable them to live their lives and to deal with their own business. And so we're looking at how we can use that temporary solution as well. So there's a collection of activities there, sponsored by the serious case panel at the most serious level, taken from learnings that we've seen through our IPRs and through our Axel visits, and deployed through the department to make a real difference to customers on the ground.
James, did you want to add anything on that, or have we covered most of it?
Fully covered, actually. Thank you. I'm sorry.
One of the things that we hear from vulnerable people is that they struggle to manage their finances, and alternative payment arrangements would be a good proactive thing to put in place to help them. The department published a very helpful online booklet that summarised the additional support that is available to customers. I think it was quite recently you published that, last week. And yet, one thing you missed was saying that there's alternative payment arrangements available if you need them. I mean, it seems like a strange thing to omit when that's a primary tool that's available to help people. Is that something you omitted deliberately, or could you take a look at?
So no, I don't think we've omitted that deliberately. I think we'll take that feedback on board. But I think, Preeta, do you want to talk about how we do support customers? Because we've mentioned debt already.
So there is a lot of information around debt hubs that we have. So we would signpost people to organisations like the Money Advisory Service to support them with that. So any discussions around financial problems that they're having, we would then signpost them to those organisations. I went to Stratford Job Centre actually, which is trialling some of the new innovation. They have a small debt hub at the side, so it's just a telephone service, but you can pick up and talk to someone. So I think in terms of how we look to see the Job Centre in the future, that's something we'd be really keen to build in, so that people can come in and get some advice on debt at the same time.
And is there a danger here? Because I think, Minister, you opened by saying our primary duty is to pay the right amount of benefit at the right time, and that's what kind of pervades. And so I look at an application form, it's not very well filled in, it's not entitled to the benefit, I refuse it. Primary duty satisfied, even though probably hand on heart I realise that the reason why it's a bit rubbish is because the person's obviously really struggled, and maybe if we were a bit proactive and reached out, we could intervene here and check. And probably the feeling we got when we went to Glasgow was that they were having a system that was trying to help people into the process, not, you know, have slightly different size holes along the journey that they could fall out of at any point. I mean, do you worry that, for all the warm words, the kind of that primary duty is paying the right amount at the right time creeps in, and, you know, that's where people really focus their work?
I think there's a balance here, fairness to the taxpayers, so that people, you know, getting money and support obviously have to be entitled to it. But equally, I think we've worked very hard, and the Chairman will know, I've been nearly 5 years in this department in various guises. We've worked really hard to understand our vulnerable customers, their barriers, the challenges that they have to making a claim that they're perfectly entitled to. So I think we've I think we're trying to find the right balance between the right safety nets for vulnerable claimants, ensuring that they're able to cope with decisions and processes and that they need to take to comply with welfare rules. But equally, things like Help to Claim gives that practical, tailored support for anyone who needs it, and it enables people to come into UC. There are, as I say, videos, appointees, all of this outreach that we have to try and make sure, and those networks locally, and again connections with the CAB, to make sure that anybody who may feel or we might be worried is slipping through the net isn't. And that's why when we have got it wrong, I think we've been the first to when there's been a tragic case or something really awful, that we take it really seriously. It's why we've increased the number of our internal process reviews. It's why, if we have fallen short or others, you know, we've worked really hard to learn and understand that. So I think it's a core theme for us as a department to get the core of what we do right, but always make sure vulnerability, individualised, tailored approach and time is given to those people with the needs, and that we create that trusted relationship to then signpost them on to those with the expertise and ability to help with the wider complex needs. And I think that's the fair balance we're trying to strike. I don't know, James, if you want to add to that.
Definitely. I think the gist of your question is how can we ensure that those at the sharp end are properly trained in terms of dealing with certain vulnerabilities, and I think you pointed out that some people maybe don't fill in a form properly, and that's a very good point. And I think this is incredibly important for the department, that our training reaches right down to those who start. So, for example, from the start of April of last year to the beginning of March 2024, more than 15,000 colleagues have successfully started in operational roles in DWP. Now, it's really important that all 15,000 are trained properly to handle vulnerability. So it's very important that we roll out the modules that we've got. There are various toolkits, as have been mentioned before, and training roles. So it's a valid point. No doubt it's not perfect, and we're always learning. But I think it's very important that it goes beyond, as Mims was saying. There is an obligation to the taxpayer, but it's not just that we give out benefits, which is the core of what we do. It's much, much more, and we do care.
I do think there's a real value around care across DWP as well. That is one of our DWP values. So from our permanent secretary right down, actually, it's just outstanding when you go into a job centre and you see that level of care and compassion for people. And as an area director myself, that's one of the key leadership messages that I give out, is around actually we really have to support vulnerable customers. So from the top downwards, I think that's a real value that we're trying to instill across DWP.
I don't think I would have stuck around 5 years if I didn't think it was working. And one of the DWP complaint stats from April 21 to December 23, complaints pertaining to disability services have decreased from 2,690 in the 21-22 period to 2,330. So we're going in the right direction, but I hope you're seeing from us that nobody would want to be a learning, understanding approachable organisation, and that care, as Preeta said, is embedded for those with the most complex needs.
The overall number of complaints has gone up in that period, hasn't it?
I've only got my area to Stephen, so I'm happy to share that, but obviously that's my area of focus. But, you know, I was pleased to see that, because that can be some of the most complex and challenging areas, as Nigel has alluded to, and, you know, we're going in the right direction. Liz, do you want to just add?
Can I just pick up the point about help to claim? Because our understanding is that in the last 2 years it has been a telephone-only service, that it was face-to-face up till April 2022, and since then it hasn't been. That's correct, isn't it, I think?
So I think, but the option to send a visiting officer is still there.
Sorry,
the option to send a visiting officer is still there.
Yes,
so if we assess them, we can do that.
But the help to claim service itself is no longer face-to-face.
Yeah. On the complaint number, you're right, it has gone up, but so has demand for our services. So it's not out of kilter with the increased demand that we've seen across the department.
Thank you. Selene Saxby.
Thank you and good morning. To what extent is your complaints process adequately accessible, and how could it be improved?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, perhaps I could start by saying that we have definitely improved the transparency by publishing complaints data in last year's annual report, which you may know. At the official session on the 28th of February, I know that the committee asked why the department does not publish complaints data by benefit line, for example, but we took this feedback on board, and this information was published, you'll be pleased to hear, on the 21st of March, just very recently. And we will continue to publish complaints by benefit line going forward. But in terms of accessibility, I think the first thing to say, which is perhaps rather obvious, which is that the DWP's complaints process is available on gov.uk. It actually happens to be the first option that appears following improvement work that we've made to improve our complaint service and make it more accessible and visible to our customers. So a customer can lodge a complaint through several different channels, for example, in writing or by email, over the phone, or via their MP, as you will know. And they can also ask for a representative to support their complaint. And this includes going via external organisations such as the CAB and others. And the department, by the way, will always accept that complaint. So it's very important that we always look at our complaint service. It's important that it should be accessible and visible. And I think what I would say is that complaints remain significantly lower than pre-pandemic levels.
Thank you. And what is done to ensure that claimants do understand the complaints process and to actually support them through it?
Yeah, well, I think that I probably covered quite a lot in terms of what I've said. I don't know whether anybody can, Liz, you might want to...
So I think the point about accessibility of the complaints process is a good one. So we do publish our process online. Our philosophy is that anybody can support a customer to resolve an issue in the moment when that happens, and we actively train our people to do just that. If that doesn't happen, of course, the complaint can escalate, and we can then deal with that in a more formal manner. As technology allows us, we can become more accessible in the way that customers can complain. So on the UC system, for example, a customer can raise a complaint through their journal, and that's where we encourage them to do that. So there is an online tool. And as we bring other benefit lines through our service modernisation programme, we're hopeful that other channels can open up to make complaints. We can support customers to make a complaint. So, we also are actively using new technologies, and testing how we can scan, the interactions that our customers have with us to spot complaints and spot vulnerability. But that is in the very early stages, and it's reliant on us developing that technology. But there is a real desire across the department for us to do much more of that, as and when the technology and the associated investment with that technology allows us to.
Thank you.
And I might add, if I may, that the investment in the new sort of complaints process, or sort of restructuring, includes extending to the professional development of complaints handlers. So a bespoke learning pathway is undertaken by all complaints handlers, and using the complaint standards framework, we build colleague capability and learning. So again, it comes back to us being a learning department, which I think is an important point to make.
And that's in line with the PHSO standards as well. So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I really want to focus a little bit on what Mr. Stephen said at the beginning and just explore some of the points there. I quite appreciate and understand that DWP and DWP staff, the vast majority of them, will want to be doing the right thing and want to be supporting claimants. However, we're not quite there yet. So the purpose of this inquiry was to look at the systematic approaches that are being used to ensure that that does happen. It can't be just isolated training, it has to be an organisation-wide approach. And currently, according to matrix law, the ad hoc policies that do exist aren't generally applied. There's no systematic approach to safeguarding. There's no clear definition of vulnerable claimants, and this has come not just from matrix law, from a whole range of evidence that we have received. The NAO says there's no means of identifying vulnerable claimants at application stage of UC, and yet we're about to complete the rollout of UC, and it's perceived not as a priority. This is just some of the headlines from the evidence that we've collected. I appreciate where you want to be, but this is where we are now. And then on top of that, we have had some tragic cases, and we know that we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg around that. I'll be asking you some questions around that because of how harms and deaths are reported ultimately to the serious case panel. I just want to, before I get onto my substantive questions, the point about trust, you want claimants to trust you. That needs to be reciprocated, and it's not, and that's the perception that DWP doesn't trust the claimants. If I went into a job centre and asked, on a scale of 1 to 10, where what's the priority for safeguarding, what would I be told?
Could I perhaps start off by giving some reassurance to you? Because
Lord Younger, I appreciate, but please could you tell me, what do you think I would get in response to that answer if I went to an ad hoc, if I went down the road to a job centre and I asked, is safeguarding your number one priority? What would they say?
I hope that they would, I don't know whether they would say it with the number one priority, but they would certainly put it extremely highly on their list. But perhaps it might be helpful just to set out, I'll stall if I may on this, because this is a really important point that you've raised, because we are a learning organisation, and having systems in place, and you spoke about a systemic issue, where we must and can consistently act on feedback, and ensuring that when we learn experiences for our customers which have fallen below expectations, we use this learning to make the changes, the necessary changes to improve what we're doing. So I think we've already said that treating complaints seriously is a part of that, using them as an opportunity to learn and invest in the training and development of staff, and we've touched on the training of staff, which I think is also critical in terms of your questions, which feeds into the whole department learning.
Can I stop you there, Lord?
Yes, of course.
Thank you so much for that. I'll give you the one example that, again, was provided to us. It's a well-known case by this committee, and I know you'll be familiar with it too. Errol Graham. Evidence to the coroner from a member of staff, a senior member of staff from DWP, was that his case was going to be reviewed so that learning did come out of it. An absolute dearth of investigation. Nothing has happened since that inquest. The coroner had to write a number of times to the department to find out what was happening, and no response. It was a disgraceful attempt. Now, I appreciate you are moving on, but at the moment we cannot say, based on that example, that you're learning all that you need to do from that one example.
Sure. Could I perhaps come back to you on that? Of course, I appreciate that. That is one example, and I'm not normally wanting to be drawn in on specific cases, but can I say I'm aware of this case? Of course I am. It was an incredibly tragic case. And can I just say, first of all, our condolences remain with Mr. Graham's family. I think you'll be aware that the department has made significant changes since this case, and this has been recognised by the Safeguarding Adults Board review. I don't know whether that helps or not, but it's important just to get across how seriously we've taken this particular case. But it does not reflect, which I was trying to say earlier, the changes that we're making, and I'm trying to get across our systemic improvements.
Thank you for that. Can I then ask, and this one will be for Minister Davies, if that's okay, what systems and procedures are in place then to identify potential risks and harms of new policies?
But what do you mean by new policies?
So we know, for example, that there are a number of artificial intelligence systems that are being, and machine tools that are being used to assess potential fraud of claimants. I think there are 9 at the moment. I could list the 9 if you like. But in the most recent account submitted by your department, it's been said that it's testing for bias in these 9 systems only to people with the protected characteristics of age, gender and pregnancy. In other words, the bias, for example, on protected characteristics of disability is not being included within the AI design. So would you like to confirm whether that is correct or not?
I'm not leading on AI in this area, but I know, James, you might want to write on that point.
Most definitely, yes. I mean, I happen to be responsible for AI in DWP as a minister, so I'm more than happy to take that back. I know there's a huge amount of work going on in AI in the department. In fact, we're one of the leaders in terms of looking at departments cross-governmentally. So may I take that very specific point back? Because I think you've made the point really that in terms of designing new systems for AI, we've got to get it right early on. So
can I just refer you then, because it's actually in your own department's accounts.
Okay.
So it's actually there, but so it's within your accounts, and it says that's the case. So
okay.
Either the account's wrong or, but it does, and this is what the point I'm getting to. If we are a learning organisation, we're systematically identifying the risks and potential harms to claimants, that would be one thing that you will want to be checking on.
Can I come in on that? Because aside from the AI points that are referenced in the annual report, there are other projects that are live, and I think I mentioned these when I met you last time. So we are using the white mail scanning now, so customers that do write to us, we are testing how we pull out vulnerabilities using that white mail to ensure that they are getting the focus that they need. And in addition to that, and as a result of an action from the serious case panel, we are also investing in our call listening service, so we've got some functionality live, but we are dependent on a big technology project to roll that out across the whole of the department, which we're expecting to do that next year, and that will do exactly what you are describing there in terms of identifying, words that might identify vulnerability for a customer, and we will be able to pull those out. In addition to that, if a customer complains and it goes to our complaints team, we scan the inbox for words of vulnerability there as well, so that we can pull those out and we can get those to the teams that can support those customers.
Thank you. I appreciate what you're saying, Liz, but do you also appreciate then for somebody that has been potentially being flagged as being fraudulent, the distress that would cause, especially if they're already vulnerable?
Yeah, I think that's, we'll take that action to right.
Thank you. I'm grateful. Can I just move on, if I may, and then again it relates to the systematic approach that the department is taking or not, and that is for, I got a lovely letter back from Peter Schofield when I was concerned that the number of deaths that were actually being investigated by the serious case panel didn't reflect the total number of deaths, including deaths by suicide, that the department had previously agreed to investigate all deaths by suicide. And there seemed to be a filtering out by the department of what the serious case panel could be examining for areas that needed to be learned from. How can the serious case panel do their job to understand what the issues are if they're only getting half of the cases to look at?
Perhaps it might be helpful for me to say a little bit about how the serious case panel works. Would that be helpful? Which would help
I know how it works. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Lord Younger. I do appreciate your help with that.
Debbie, if I may, there's just a couple of lines of note here, just which might be helpful for the committee before we write fully on the AI point. And it's a reminder here, and forgive me, I haven't noticed it before, that the use of the AI is for the earlier identification of vulnerable customers as part of it, but that full decision making won't be through AI, so that it will be trying to identify those that need support soonest. So I think your point is very helpful, and we'll take that specifically away. Sorry, you were coming back in on something.
Yes, I was. So, and again, thank you, Lord Younger, for your points about the serious case panel. You made the earlier remark that this is about learning, and yes, absolutely, DWP needs to be a learning organisation. And my point is, if the department then is already filtering out some of the cases so that the serious case panel can't examine the full range of deaths, how can we ensure that full learning is possible?
You may be referring to the statistics. So certainly what I've got down here is that of the 10 total PFD reports issued to the department, 8 have been subject to an IPR. The PFD cases in which an IPR was not conducted occurred prior to the implementation of the IPR process. So I think it's fair to say that every time there's a death, we take it incredibly seriously, and that leads into an IPR, which I think you probably know the process for that.
Can I just come in on that? Because just as a point of clarity, the serious case panel don't investigate the deaths. The coroners investigate the deaths. What the serious case panel does is take the learning from a number of learning sources, and actually it's more broad than just the deaths. So we take insight from the process reviews, which you're aware of. We also look at feedback from our axles. The example that I gave earlier on appointees is absolutely an example of that. We take insight from complaints, and we take the themes to serious case panel to tackle the most systemic issues across the department. So it's not there to represent the deaths. But on that point, if there is, I came from external, as you know, 2 years ago, and I came into this department with a different perception of what I'm seeing on the inside. Any serious case that happens in this department, where there is a PFD especially, is escalated to that executive team straight away. So the executive team have full visibility of the cases, and then we take the learning to the serious case panel so we can make practical changes on the ground. So they're not, the serious case panel are not investigating the deaths.
I appreciate that. Of the 60 IPR referrals, and this is from the letter from Peter Schofield, which met the criteria, 50 were referred following a customer death, 29 were not. Yep. And it was why were they not? So these were deaths and serious harms, 18 deaths, 11 serious harms. Yep. Our question is why not?
The key point on this is where there's an allegation against the department. Customers need to disclose, obviously, and they're not in an obligation to do that. If they do share that information with us, and there is any suggestion that it is because of something that the department has done, we will then look into those cases. Customers do take their own lives tragically. Customers do die, and many of those are not because of something that's happened with the department.
I think, again, I get back to the point that this is about learning, and if the serious case panel that is meant to be there to establish and gather the learning for the whole system, it can't do that if it's only getting half of the cases. And there is the added complication, which I'm going to leave it after this point, of given the department had agreed to investigate after the NAO report all suicides, why that changed. I mean, this is really serious, and it gets back to, if this is a priority, and we haven't really got this right. It's serious.
Could I just make one more point, which is that we've made a further investment by appointing a chief medical advisor, and this is quite an important step, who's responsible for reviewing all PFDs, ensuring that learning is taken forward, and this helps to identify themes that can be addressed by the serious case panel. So it's a sort of, it creates a loop and a feedback. But by having a chief medical advisor, I think that's incredibly important as an extra to what we do.
That would be very helpful to meet them. Final question to Stephen, if that is okay. So, why did the DWP not become one of the trailblazer organisations for the rollout of the UK central government complaint standards?
That's a very specific question.
So
maybe Liz, you could ask that.
So we have subsequently worked with the PHSO to implement those standards, and we've been working with those, and we've actually launched the standards. We didn't do the trailblazing at the time. We did ask for information from the PHSO around what would the insight from that trial be used on. We didn't actually get a response to that, but that didn't stop us introducing our complaint standards that are in line with those PHSO standards. So we have got those, and the Minister mentioned earlier about the dedicated learning pathway for complaint handlers, which we've done that with the oversight of the PHSO.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps if we write as well about the link around the clinical governance, the work of the National Medical Advisor, and how this is working across government around safeguarding, and the link into the National Suicide Strategy. So I think that would be helpful to put a little bit of additional information there for you, Debbie, because
that would be Mims. Thank you.
As we discussed this morning, the Department does not have a statutory safeguarding responsibility, but it's not stopped us from, I think, and I hope the committee can land the point this morning, that we've made considerable investment into safeguarding in the clinical teams across our safeguarding plans and more widely around that realm. So let me draw that out in writing for the committee afterwards, because I think that will help Debbie with her questions and the links just heard.
Could I also, if I may, just add that additional insight is given through ICE. So we work pretty closely with ICE. And so where ICE identifies a particular gap, then we obviously, naturally enough, take that very seriously and take that forward.
Can I just, on the serious case panel, it's been described to us as opaque and lacking in transparency. I wonder whether, for example, the recommendations coming out of serious case panel could be published, or some other ways found to kind of open this process up a bit. Do you think?
Yes, which I'm trying to navigate that to try and get to the point that we can share the recommendations from that and the IPRs. So I'm working on that.
Okay, that would be very good. What sort of timetable would you anticipate?
End of the year, but I can't guarantee.
End of this year.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much. Selene Saxby.
Thank you. Moving on to sort of the exacerbation and creation of vulnerabilities, what policies does the department have in place to ensure that it doesn't create new vulnerabilities within the system when new policies are introduced?
I'm quite interested on why our policies would create new vulnerabilities, because what we're discussing is some of our claimants' existing vulnerabilities. So just sort of leaning into that, Selene, what do you mean in particular?
So some of the evidence that we've heard previously suggested, for example, where it moved from being an individual claimant into a household claimant, that was then impacting on people within the household if you had anyone with domestic abuse, and so that some of the changes within the system are in themselves creating a new vulnerability. It may be an unintended consequence, but that just by change, or actually the system, we know, for example, that just accessing benefits for many people in itself creates an amount of stress on top of the situation somebody's already dealing with. So it's that the creation of a vulnerability by the system.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, that's really helpful. So customers with complex needs who require additional support, as we've said, potentially will have the visiting appointment. Reasonable adjustments are always put into place to ensure that benefits can be accessed and maintained, taking into account how well a claimant may be able to cope with those processes, and indeed that additional layer of checks around complexities and vulnerabilities are looked at. And perhaps, Preeta, you can talk about the UC flags and how that is picked up. I think where we've had, for example, 2 unsuccessful visits, now we keep customers on the system, their claims aren't closed, it will be escalated through the additional checks that Liz has spoken about before, and then the links to the police, local authority, social services are made to assure customer safety. I would actually say also, fundamentally, I think slightly the opposite about being able to know exactly what's going on in a household is very helpful with the Ask for Annie service, where perhaps people are coming into view because of UC, where they haven't got English as a first language, where they haven't been able to tell anyone about what's going on, but actually a visit to a job centre is a safe space to disclose what is going on. We've got the black dot, where if someone's being coercively controlled, you can put a black dot on your hand and wave that in front of your work coach, and therefore you can they can try and find a way of talking to you separately. So actually I think some of this actually brings some of those vulnerabilities into view, but maybe Preeta, you can give some practical examples.
So I suppose just on the system, as Liz said earlier, there are specific words for work coach team leaders to actually see. So if someone writes a word on the journal and it is a word that perhaps would imply that they are in distress, that is actually flagged, and so we can actually see that in the job centre. So that's one way. But when you're making the claim, for example, if you're homeless or if you're an armed, you used to be in the armed services, if you're a victim of domestic abuse, there's ways of telling us about that that's actually on the claim forms as well. So there are a number of ways of highlighting that on the system as well.
So if I move on from there to one of the sort of very specific areas that we know does create issues for claimants is recovering overpayments. And some of those are from DWP errors, and then benefit deductions are applied indiscriminately regardless of the claimant's vulnerability. Do you think this approach is acceptable when these deductions can obviously exacerbate a person's vulnerabilities, and I would suggest even create it in the first place?
So our debt management team have actually created a vulnerability framework, so that's been more recent, but we've got vulnerability champions. You can call, obviously, the debt helpline. They will look at how you can repay the money if you can't pay it all in one go. So there's lots of things that have happened in debt management that's really helping vulnerable customers in terms of repayments and how they can repay that.
But do you think it's appropriate, given that some of these issues are actually created within the DWP, to then expect a potentially vulnerable claimant to be proactive in fixing it rather than the other way around?
Well, I think we've made every effort to avoid overpayment. I think that's the number one thing I think is blamed, particularly for those most vulnerable when it comes to benefits. And I think, again, it's that individualised, tailored approach. I think where overpayments do occur, we've got a duty to recover them quickly and efficiently as possible, but not causing hardship to those making the repayments. And agents will look rightly to negotiate an affordable repayment plan, and there's no limit to a number of times a person can request to change their payment plan. The department has reduced it down to 25% from 40% in terms of, and you can choose to repay sooner, and the deductions from the standard cap on it has gone down, which I think we would all see is important, so that we're not causing undue benefit hardship. But again, this is very much about the work coach understanding who they're working with, knowing what's going on in their lives. We take different deductions according to the categories that the debt falls into as well. And yes, sometimes UC is seen as the reason for these issues, but it can be more complex, as I think we've described this morning. And I think we see the importance of supporting claimants who have incurred debt. And under UC, it is a coordinated approach to deductions from benefit to try to support them with their financial obligations, but ultimately do it in an understanding, supportive way, which is affordable and keeps them as supported as possible. But it's a fair challenge.
Thank you. And so does the department gather data on how many vulnerable claimants are being sanctioned?
Do we have that data? Do we have that data, Preeta?
No, I don't think we keep the... we can't, from the sanctions data, we can't tell who is vulnerable and who isn't.
Let me write a note back on that, because I think Preeta's correct. I don't think it's broken down in particular that way.
So if I could turn that on its head, if you've already identified somebody as being vulnerable, is it then appropriate to sanction them, given that the sanctions are supposed to be being a deterrent?
So we've got a number of ways to ensure that anyone who is vulnerable isn't actually sanctioned.
Yeah.
So as soon as they come into the job centre, when they have their claimant commitment, if they've got particular health conditions that stop them looking for work, we can put easements in at that stage. Obviously, if it then goes into the actual claim and we decide to look at that process, the work coach has to do a pre-referral form, which is then discussed with the work coach team leader, and they have to agree that there's no doubt there that actually we've considered vulnerability. It's really, really important that that's considered before we actually send that to a decision maker. And then we have another pair of eyes looking at it. So when the decision maker decides to put that sanction on, there's another pre-referral form which they have to consider, and vulnerability is then discussed again at that stage with someone who's at a higher grade. And it's only through all of that process that we decide whether, has vulnerability, has doubt actually been formulated here before we put a sanction on. So for me, actually, the sanctions process has a number of safety mechanisms to protect vulnerable customers before a sanction is put on.
Thank you. But Mims, it'd be really helpful if you were able to write to confirm on, if that data is being collated, because whilst the safety mechanisms sound great, if we don't know at the end if we are actually collating that data, that would be great.
Yeah, and I think just to add to Preeta's point, I think benefit entitlements never automatically just stopped, particularly where there might be disablement, medical conditions, other vulnerability, and that goes to wider conditionality and sanctions. So I'm happy to reiterate what the committee needs.
That'd be great, thank you.
Could I also say that in terms of your question about overpayments, I mean, it's not, but it could be a thematic issue. If it was a thematic issue, then we learn from that, and that can get escalated, obviously via ICE or an IPR report. And then these can be fed into the serious case panel if necessary. We're not there, but I'm just saying that there is that process to allow us to understand whether there's a real issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Marcia de Cordova.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Can I just say, before I go into my question, which is all going to be about the DWP as a learning organisation, to learn and obviously make the necessary changes, gathering the appropriate data and information is a core element of that, isn't it? Would you say?
Yes.
Yes, it is. So things like my colleague's question just around data and sanctioning data for vulnerable claimants, that to me seems like a basic of something that you would want to collate, whilst you may have steps in place to hopefully prevent a vulnerable claimant being sanctioned. Obviously, there will be cases where it does happen. So I think it's really important that data on anything pertaining to vulnerable claimants should be measured, and it should be collated if it's not. So I look forward to hearing back from that. But today you've talked a lot about being a learning organisation, and indeed it was also in your written evidence. As you know, the PHSO, when they were before us, told us that there is a lack of transparency inherent in the way that the department operates, and that transparency is not sufficiently built in to the culture of the organisation that could legitimately say you are a learning organisation. So you spoke a bit about that today already, but I want to hear a bit more about how you are ensuring your culture and the way you do things and being more transparent, you are actually becoming that learning organisation that you aspire to be.
Perhaps I could lead off on this. It's a fair point, and actually the committee may know that in 2020 we set the ambition to increase transparency, and I am pleased to tell the committee that we've taken and continue to take very positive steps to do so. So we've reported the progression in the department's wider advanced customer support activities in the annual report and accounts, which you may know about. And then on the 19th of March, just recently, the department published this booklet, which I think has been mentioned already, the additional support for DWP customers, which demonstrates the variety of activities taking place in DWP to meaningfully support customers experiencing any barriers, if they do so, and indeed vulnerability, which again we've touched on a lot today. Now, to give you a little bit of granular detail, activity includes improved accessibility support, such as, which I think has been mentioned before actually, which is the British Sign Language videos. I've mentioned already the appointment of a Chief Medical Advisor and the ongoing transformation in technology, which provides a more consistent based support. And I think it's known that the NAO have themselves recognised that we have made a step change in our reporting processes and our transparency. So I think it's a very important point, and I think hopefully you will have seen, the committee will have seen that we have acted upon previous requests, and we continually look at increasing transparency, particularly through the separate advanced customer support publication.
Was there anything you wanted to add, Minister?
No, I think James has covered a lot of it. I think the ambition we set out to the committee back in 2020 was to increase transparency, and I think we've taken some really positive steps. I think Liz has highlighted it. I think we have seen some very serious and concerning situations that as ministers and as a department, of course, we want to learn and be transparent about, and I hope you will see steps in this. Of course, as a learning organisation, complex needs and different communities out there, there's always going to be more to do, but I think we're in a positive place. Is there, Liz, anything you wanted to draw out?
I'll just come in on the learning organisation. So for me, a learning organisation is about having the systems in place to continually learn from the feedback that we get, and that's exactly what we're striving to do. And you referenced the culture change there, and that is a journey for a big organisation, and seeing externally what culture change looks like, it is a thing that has to happen over time, and we are definitely invested in doing just that, and we learn at different points throughout the organisation. So if that's at an individual level, Preeta will tell you that every day we're giving feedback to our frontline colleagues, whether that be through complaints, whether that be through observations, through call listening that we do to say how could we do that better, how could we handle that better. At a departmental level, we've got infrastructures in place. So, for example, through the IPRs that we do, every month for UC and quarterly for other product lines, we meet with the leadership teams of those businesses and share with them the findings that we found from the IPRs over that period, and sit down and decide what actions we're going to take on the back of that. And then at the top level, we've already touched on the work that the Serious Case Panel does, but that is supported by several multidisciplinary teams that Preeta and I oversee, to look at the specifics of what is it that we are learning from various data sources, and how are we responding to that, and what are the things that we're doing, and what are we escalating to the Serious Case Panel. So there's always more we can do in this space. Nobody ever stops learning individually or as an organisation, but that's what the sort of direction of travel, and I want to formalise those and get them firing on all cylinders really across the department, but we've certainly got the infrastructures in place to do that.
So just on that then, in terms of all of the safeguarding process and so forth, do you think you are doing enough sufficiently to ensure that the public know about that, PHS, and everybody are familiar and are fully understanding of how your safeguarding processes operate? How is that being shared and communicated?
I think that's one of the reasons, Marsha, that I invited people in to come and see and look and have a feel of how it works, so that perceptions and some of our partners and others understand, what we're doing. So whether it's our special points of contact when it comes to veterans or care leavers or others, we've got those committed people on the ground to reach out to those with the biggest complexities. They've got those partnerships, those relationships, so that we can direct people, because what is out there to be directed to or needed in each and every community will be different. And so although we're a learning organisation, we're a place-based and individualised organisation as well, and I think that's changed quite fundamentally, so that we understand the local labour market, the complexities and the local needs, as equally as we understand the partnerships we need to match them.
So short of obviously you say people coming in, what are you putting out in terms of making sure that there's sufficient?
We've got our OSEF, so our Operational Stakeholder Engagement Forum, which we meet with regularly, and we share the updates from the department with, I think there's 68 members in that OSEF group now, so different organisations that can come and hear. So if there are organisations out there that want to be part of that, by all means let us know, because we can expand that membership. But we get really great feedback from that community around, how are we sharing, they get input. We're also working really hard to bring organisations in to shape some of these things. So my team are starting to map various customer journeys, starting with the most vulnerable, to understand, what does this look like through a customer's lens, and how can we bring organisations that are experts in this, so Rethink is a good example of that, to start saying, well, what does this look like for a customer? What do we need to consider at this point, so that we can co-create those experiences as we modernise our services?
If I can build on that, Marsha, we recently met with one of the wonderful blind and vision charities. I met recently with a PIP claimant, with one of our colleagues who'd had a terrible experience, and we went through exactly why and what do we learn from it. So we learned both from colleagues, or I think partnerships from charities as well. The Charities Consortium, I meet with them quarterly in terms of disablement, and what do they know that our customers need that we need to know. And I think that's really important, that people feel that they've got a voice with DWP that shapes those needs on the ground, and particularly where health conditions and wellbeing needs are there. So there's no barrier up, and we encourage that on the ground, whether it is working with local GPs, working with local charities, youth hubs, etc. And then I think some of our programmes, which have been very place-based or sector-based, whether it's Kickstart, which has been able to work with younger people with maybe more complex needs or barriers, to work directly with local employers to know how best to support them to get them into work. So it's learning on that level as equally as it is on that kind of corporate, strategic and transparent level.
There are two examples I'd like to give. I think we've mentioned the annual report, but this is talking about the visibility to the public of the department, which is the gist of what you were saying. And certainly the department has shared IPRs via FOI requests, obviously subject to redactions and all of that, but also the serious case meetings, panel meetings are on gov.uk, so there is that visibility, necessary visibility for the public to see what we do.
I'd just also underline, and Preeta knows this particularly in my area, the people that work for us are dug into their community. They love what they do. They're doing life-changing work every day. And I think we all feel when it goes wrong. We all get it and we want to learn from it. And I think that is about that care that goes within, because it's a wonderful part of the civil service that you're very directly dug into your community making a change for. And I'm always absolutely blown away at how far people will go. I think our previous Secretary of State, Therese Coffey, called some of our work coaches mother hens. And I've met some of those because they are women who are helping with perhaps care leavers, people who haven't got parents and somebody looking out for them maybe at home. So I think our teams on the ground really strive, and we try to give them the tools to help people change their lives and understand those complex needs. And as the labour market changes and as the world changes, many of the people we see have more vulnerabilities and more complexities, which is why we need the statutory duty from others and their skill and ability to support us to signpost those people to the support they need. And I'd like to use the opportunity to pay tribute to the people that are doing this day in and day out.
Thank you.
They are brilliant.
Thank you, Minister. So on that point around staffing then, do you feel that the department has the capacity to make sure that safeguarding of vulnerable adults is consistently being made a priority? And if you do, I would like to know, how is that being measured, or how are you sure that that's all working?
Yeah, I think, James, you might want to lead on colleagues more widely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I touched earlier on the number that you may not have been here, but in terms of the colleagues that we have started. So 15,000 colleagues have started over the last year or so, and we have a well-established process to forecast the demand for our services and adjust the number of staff that we recruit. So it's important that we sort of manage that side. And since April 2023, the department has been operating an intensive recruitment programme.
Since when? Sorry, I didn't hear. 20?
Since April 2023, yeah. The department has been operating an intensive recruitment programme with the intention of building and maintaining a level of 16,500 full-time equivalent work coaches to be able to support people into work. So it's just to give you a bit of background in terms of the scale of the individuals who come in. So it's the package that counts. So we have a detailed mental health training package, which includes a module on supporting customers, particularly those who are at risk of taking their own life or self-harm. And it's really to provide colleagues with all the learning that they need to apply them in different scenarios. And I think the point has been made earlier today about how the needs can be incredibly complex, and the training therefore has to be up to the quality necessary. We're constantly learning, and we constantly revisit and strengthen the guidance and training for staff, both current staff and new staff. I think we've already mentioned the 6-point plan and the advanced customer support referrals. There's a complex needs training event which is rolled out this year, and that complements our current learning offer and allows participants to reflect on our tailored customer service. So there's a lot, I think, that's been said, but this hopefully adds to this really important point that it's not just about what we do is giving out benefits and all of that. It's much, much more.
And I think,
but also sorry,
I was just going to say, complex needs is right at the centre of all our training for our new work coaches. So it's in their induction, it's in their consolidation. Obviously, when someone starts the job, you've got team leaders who sit out, look and watch the quality conversations that are happening, do the coaching back to the work coaches. So it's really, really key. And as the Minister said, we've got 2-day mental health training. We've got our own place-based district provision tools that just set out a lot of this information. So it really is at the sort of front and centre of everything that we're doing with new work coaches.
I think it's about empowering our colleagues to ask the right questions and be able to signpost accordingly. And that's why I think, and I'm really proud of our trauma-informed approach, which is rolling out, because we know those who are experiencing adversity can have such a pervasive impact on a person's life. And they can then have an impact on how they then interact with services. So again, that's why being able to talk to us and then go to a trusted partner, I'm conscious it could be a re-traumatising experience, sharing things even with us. So our team being trauma aware and being adequately responsive is really important, and I know our teams are really welcoming this, and this is both in child maintenance area, in decision making, and also in job centres. So as I said earlier, Chair, about that being a more complex group of people that we're engaging with, of course we need a different way of engaging and integrating that into our core business in the way that James described.
Indeed, but also it's about the staff themselves, isn't it? Which was kind of where I wanted to go with. With that,
I mean, they are brilliant and they've got a lot to know and understand. Yes,
precisely, and obviously that you are familiar with some of the work that the PCS Trade Union produced in terms of staff experiences and their testimonies about how they were feeling understaffed, difficulties with recruitment. I appreciate you've said that, but obviously working conditions, but also retention. So you're familiar with all of that, so it's how you're
I think retention, I know James wants to come in, but it never ceases to amaze me when I'm in Caxton House, when there's an array of long service certificates there, 30, 40 years. I think we've had one person do 60 years with DWP and regularly 40 years. So when people do love what they do with us, and as James has described, there's a lot of training and learning to do, and keeping that amount of staff up to date and at that level with the needs is challenging. James, do you maybe just want to talk about colleague support?
I tell you what it is. It's two very important points because you're mentioning staff, but the safety of staff and the health of staff is also important. It's not just looking after our customers. So it's very important that our colleagues feel safe and well, and that they're supported properly. So through our department's wellbeing and inclusion strategies and frameworks, we continue to work hard to create a self-healthy and collaborative environment. And obviously that has to go down to the local level. But it might be helpful, and I won't give it all, but in terms of the committee, allowing me to give some feedback from colleagues as to what they think, which perhaps strikes at the heart of your question. So in 2023, the People Survey provided an important opportunity for us to hear about the things that matter to colleagues. And nearly 60,000 colleagues shared their views, and it was the highest response rate since 2018 at 68%. And the score remains higher than pre-pandemic levels at 61%. And very briefly, I'll just finish on this one. The People Survey core themes remain relatively stable for the work at 74%, my manager at 77%, my team at 83%, inclusion and fair treatment 80%, leadership and managing change at 50%, along with resources and workload at 76%. So it's just to give you a flavour that we do engage with our colleagues. It's important to get feedback from them, and that to train them is important too.
I do, obviously, but that evidence that was produced was quite stark also. So taking that on board is important as well, isn't it? So just final question from me. The PHSO told us about a situation where they had investigated a case used as Mrs. U that found that there were 118,000 other people in the same situation. However, the department's inability initially did not want to agree to deal with this as a structural issue, despite the evidence showing that there were systemic issues there. And you were told that you would deal with it on a case-by-case or on an individual basis. So I know that the situation has evolved since then, but why wasn't the decision taken when you were alerted to it to handle all of those cases potentially that had the same issue?
I don't think we can comment on that specific case. Sorry.
You can't comment on it.
I don't think so. I haven't.
I don't have anything.
I haven't got the information.
Actually,
maybe we could take that away.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Sorry.
It is now being handled, but it took quite a long time before the department accepted that this was something that needed to be looked at.
Let's take that away.
Yes.
Point there for learning from, perhaps, for the future.
Very much so. That's helpful if we
More
can
learning.
take that away.
More learning today.
Thank you very much. Debbie Abrahams.
Yes, just a couple of quick ones from me in relation to how you measure the impact of safeguarding practices internally.
How would you measure that, Preeta? Locally?
Do you have particular metrics? Again, not just local, because it's a systematic thing, so how...
Yeah, so we have got standards in our quality framework where we are, that is what we are looking for through all of our quality activity. So where we'd be looking for adherence to process, we are now rolling out standards across all of our quality frameworks to say, actually, where there is vulnerability, have we spotted it, have we taken the right actions, have we invoked the 6-point plan, for example. So those quality assurance standards are being rolled out across that quality agenda.
And how often do you publish those?
So I don't believe we do publish the quality.
Okay, so that's something for us to look into. That's okay.
Yeah, I think
because I'm trying to also explain to the committee this is about a place-based safeguarding approach as well as the systematic. Exactly.
So I think on a local level, if something does go wrong, or we get the feedback from some of the higher learning that we've had, so it could be, for example, unacceptable customer behaviour in the job centre, what we would do is sit down and just have a case conference between everyone who was involved and actually say, where did we do well, where could we improve, how do we then build that into our continuous learning in the job centre. So those are the, we do measure the number of unacceptable customer behaviour and we look at how we can learn from those.
Okay. So I was thinking more in terms of some of the things, for example, that Selene mentioned, which I thought was up, and then that Marsha followed up with. So in terms of the sanctions data and the vulnerability, so is that you would want to have that as a metric, a specific metric? I think your qualitative data is also incredibly important.
Yes.
But it needs to be both, and it'll be really useful, I think, in the spirit of learning, that to have details of both the process and the actual metrics that you are going to be using around that, which seems to be a bit of a gap. So we know there have been 6 prevention of future death reports since February 2020. There would have been a 7th, but the coroner accepted the psychologist from the department who said that they would be reviewing that, and as we know, subsequently that didn't happen. So we've got 6, but it would have been 7. 5 of these relates to death of social security claimants, and 1 from the child maintenance service. Has the department carried out all the actions it committed to in response to these reports?
I think the answer is yes to that. I mean, the first thing to say is that we take every death incredibly seriously, and we immediately, if we are mentioned as a person of interest, then particularly we take that particularly seriously. So as far as I'm aware, without discussing individual cases, yes, we have followed up promptly with those relevant cases.
Okay. I know that you rely very much on getting PFDs from coroners. I wondered, one of the questions I put to the lawyers was whether coroners, there might not be a PFD report, but whether they informed the department of where there was a death either by suicide or from other circumstances, and they informed the department. And I understand from the lawyers anyway that doesn't happen. Is that something that you will also be looking into?
Yes, I mean, one thing I'd say is that we have improved the links between the coronial service and the department. So we've set up something which you may know called the coroner focal point. That was in March 2016. And that has helped to just improve the communication in terms of what comes from them, what we should look at, and in case there's any miscommunication or something falls between 2 stools, then we have, I think, handled that okay.
Do they automatically ask when there is an unexpected death whether that person is a social security claimant or not?
I don't believe it's automatic. I think that we naturally react to what the coroner tells us. So, as I say, we react immediately if we are mentioned as an interested person in a particular death. Mercifully, there are very, very few where we are mentioned, but that's when we would act very quickly.
That might be something you might want to look at. I'm just going to these quick follow-up ones. In response to one report, DWP said that it would be rolling out further training on mental health, including new starters, and we've heard a little bit around that. However, according to Money and Mental Health Policy Institute, a recent FOI request showed that 38% of customer-facing staff in DWP had not had this mental health training. Why is that?
So we are close to 60,000 people in our department have now been trained on the mental health the mental health training. Clearly we've got to roll that out, and it is a programme of rollout, so it's not that they haven't received it, they've just not received it yet. So that will be concluded by early next year.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
I just wanted, if I may, just to add quickly on the data point. I think we're, as a department, I think we are aware it's an area for improvement and learning in terms of investigations, and the appointment of the Chief Medical Advisor, as mentioned earlier, I think will help us around the clinical governance, and that's being stood up at the moment and will link directly into the service modernisation, Debbie, that you mentioned. I think we've got a strategic ambition to develop a single colleague view of the customer through the design of the system that can be sent and received across benefit lines, as Liz said, so that this is in one place, and that'll give us a faster understanding of the customer's circumstances, enabling colleagues to have a more holistic view. And that's where we're committed to the right use of technology, as we discussed earlier as well, to make sure that our programmes of work align and data sharing works across the department as well. And also we've got some supplementary support through the Vulnerable Customer Champion linking into the AC SSL. So, is there more to do? Yes, but are we getting there and progressing and taking this through what is a big workforce? Most certainly.
Okay. Thank you. Can I put some sort of final questions to you and pick up the point you were just making? I just want to give you an example from a very recent coroner's report. This was a report last month. A terrible thing that happened. Somebody, she had a review which had triggered a mental health problem. After the review, she received 3 different letters setting out different sums of money owed to the DWP. These were sent directly to the claimant, despite the department being in receipt of correspondence from the claimant's daughter, asking for all correspondence to go through the daughter because correspondence direct to the claimant would be seriously harmful to her mental health. And then the coroner said the DWP's staff missed 6 opportunities to record vital information about this person's vulnerability, including her own disclosure about her mental health problem. The request for all communication to go through the daughter was left unactioned for 4 months, even after being uploaded to the main DWP computer system. And the coroner said they'd not heard any evidence about how DWP staff were going to be trained to ensure these mistakes were not repeated. I mean, that's obviously a horrible episode. What I'm wondering is whether what you're telling us is because of all the work you're doing, and clearly there's a lot going on, whether you think awful things like that will not happen in the future, or do you think, given the scale of the department and the complexity of the people you're dealing with, there always will be horrible things like that go on? What's the destination here?
Liz, do you want to just cover that particular?
Yes, I mean, you'll know that we're working with the coroner on that case, but I think, that is a fair question, and I think there are obviously humans involved in the process, and we will train and do as much as we can. Technology will play a role in that, which will start to make this process easier. I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we can never say that these tragic cases will happen, but it is our endeavour for this never to, not to happen. The lives of the people that we deal with are super complex. We are reliant on, even with technology, these customers telling us and disclosing some of this information to allow us to intervene. But we are certainly striving to be in a world where we don't get these cases. But obviously there's a lot of moving parts that any organisation, I think, would struggle to guarantee. I think, sadly.
We've heard that escalation routes, which used to be available to benefit advisors in the legacy system, and also the availability of implied consent for them to make inquiries on claimants' behalf, that those have both been lost with the introduction of universal credit. Shouldn't those things be reinstated? And specifically, couldn't there be a direct line for benefit advisors to call DWP, as we understand them, they used to be and isn't any longer?
I was going to say, Preeta, that would not be what my perception would be, that people could not escalate things, far from it. So,
we were given very clear evidence along those lines.
Absolutely. So maybe let's hear from Preeta operationally in terms of what her view is, because I think as James described earlier, and hopefully we've all described, we feel that there are routeways and different and growing routeways for people to escalate. Preeta,
putting your operational hat on, would you say that's what colleagues are feeling? Because I would certainly not like to think that's the case.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Who is it that doesn't feel they can escalate?
This is a bit more specific. Well, first of all, a direct line for benefit advisors to contact the department, which we understood, for example, there was one for tax credits with HMRC. There isn't anything like that at the moment with universal credit. Wouldn't that help?
I think we should probably take this away, Minister, and come back on this, because in terms of escalation, obviously anybody can come into a job centre and ask for advice from our work coaches, but they would be the customers.
Now specifically about the consent issue, that used to be the case that benefit advisors had kind of implied consent. It was accepted that if you were a benefit advisor, you had consent to ask a question on behalf of the claimant. As I understand it now, that's gone. There has to be explicit consent in order for the department to, which is a cumbersome process, takes time, and therefore much more difficult.
I think we should take this away.
Yeah, we've got information that we store on a claimant's circumstances on their UC digital service record. There's obviously the work that we're doing around the suicide prevention and the other interventions. I'm struggling about where people feel that they haven't got a route way of escalation, because we've mentioned the visiting officers, we've mentioned the other, obviously, talking straight away to team leadership. Some of the people, for example, that are in youth hubs are exactly there because of signposting and route way if there's concern, and also the way that we've changed it. If people don't engage with us, that we don't just let the claim go dormant, that we do engage with them. So I feel that if there's something specific in legacy versus now, let's take that away to go and see what exactly people feel that might be missing in this process.
A benefit advisor's line was there before, we're told, and isn't there now.
Thank you, Committee. Let's take that away.
Hear about that. A number of people have made the point to us that the department doesn't share information sufficiently, for example, with the health service or with social services. Is that a point that's covered in the framework that you're going to send us a note about?
So the framework will be a simplified version of the document that we've published, which is the additional support for customers, because that's in there. So I think in terms of, we do strive to share that information where there is especially a vulnerable customer involved. We've clearly got to adhere to our GDPR rules and keep our customers' data safe. So, and I suspect that's the previous question, some of what's tied up in there. But these are the cases where specifically our advanced customer support leads, through the safeguarding adult boards that they sit on, would be able to, being able to discuss specifics and share information where it's appropriate to keep a customer safe.
Do you accept that the department does need to do better in sharing information with the NHS, with social services?
I'd be interested to know what evidence we're looking at that suggests that we don't. So maybe that's something.
Well, we've had a good deal of evidence along those lines.
Sure. So those leads in 22-23 supported over 12,000 customer cases. And before a case reaches the ACSSLs, they would be supported by a vulnerable customer champion, who would be the first port of contact for those colleagues who identify a safeguarding concern or a customer requiring that additional support. And again, the priority is to make the right referrals so that the claimants can access the full local support they need. Whether it is mental health condition support, debt management, homelessness, food poverty. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, government per se might not be the right people for them. So it is local authorities, charities, organisations, specialists who understand what those...
It's sharing information that I was particularly with the NHS, with social services, local government.
I mentioned about sharing it within. I think Liz has just described how it can be challenging, which is why we've got stakeholder forums and groups and engagement. But I think it is a perennial problem sometimes with, how do you get people to disclose, and that's why I think, and then we're in a position where we can do that, which is why that trauma-informed approach, I think, will be transformational. Because
so you do expect there'll be further improvement in this area?
Yeah, that's what we're here for, absolutely.
Okay.
And we've looked to learn from other organisations who've seen the benefits of that to see what it can do for our organisation.
Okay. You made the point, Minister, about an awful PIP case that you heard about recently. One of the points that we've heard is that sometimes evidence from medical professionals is rejected by the department or rejected by its assessors when it really shouldn't have been rejected. But I mean, when is it appropriate for the evidence that somebody brings from a medical professional to be rejected?
I think we should take a few steps back, Chair, and I think it's about making the right decision at the right part of that journey, so that people very much feel that this process is as positive as possible. I think we do recognise that the overturn rate of appeal is high, but the numbers have to be seen in the context of the overall decisions. So on PIP, 3 million initial decisions following assessment have been made between October 2018 and September 23. 8% of that 3 million have been appealed. 5% have been cleared at tribunal hearing and 3% overturned. But I fully recognise in those stats are people and experiences.
Is your answer that the department should always accept the medical evidence that people submit from a doctor or whomever, or are there circumstances actually where it is right for the department to say no, we don't agree with that, our assessor has reached a different conclusion?
Yeah, and there's a debate on this later today, and I'm looking at it very strongly. I think the main reasons for decisions to be overturned on appeal are...
No, sorry, that's not... The question is how the department should deal with medical evidence that's submitted, whether it is appropriate sometimes to reject it and say, we don't agree with that, we've got a different view, or should it always be accepted?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, in terms of the tribunal, it's often cogent oral evidence that makes the difference, and not everybody is able to write it down or explain it in a way, which is why digitalisation of PIP and other things can be very helpful. And I think, again, at risk of getting boring about it, we are a learning organisation when it comes to overturning of appeals, working closely with providers about making sure they're getting the right assessments and process in there.
The point about how the department should handle.
Yeah, well, I think that again is why we've got that clinical lead and learning in terms of there as well. And of course, people's complexities and health needs are changing and becoming more complex as well. So I think there's a lot in all of this for us to look and understand.
Just, finally, you said that you'd like to be in a world where these terrible things that happen from time to time don't happen any more. You're on a journey. How long do you think this journey is? When are we going to reach the point where it's as good as it's going to be? What's the period we're looking at?
I think we've got some great positives, whether it's visiting officers and that reach into the community and making sure we stay connected with people, I think is really key. That just because people in receipt of benefit doesn't mean they're okay, so we need to keep engaged with them. I think decreasing our complaints, as mentioned this morning, that we're learning from that and they're going in the right direction. I think getting them down, learning from the trauma-informed approach. I think given the complexities of what's going out there post-COVID and other things, it's going to be more challenging for what is a very big organisation. But then on a local... You've mentioned
a number of things that will be sort of finished in about a year's time, early next year. Is that the point when we'll... It's been done?
I'm sure Liz will, because this is her day job, but I was just going to say, but this on the local level is also about, so you've got the big kind of super tanker DWP and then the local level and the individual experience. And I think if you can see change, improvement, learning, transparency running up and down, that organisation, I think you're in a pretty decent place. Are we going to be able to stave off every single tragic and sad case? Oh, if only. There's no crystal ball in this, but those trusted relationships and partnerships and listening by the work coaches and our teams, and those people having the confidence to bring that forward. What I'm trying to understand,
which I haven't really understood though, is you explained we're on a journey. The journey that you've embarked on, when are we going to reach the destination?
Yeah.
Will that be at the beginning of next year, or is this a sort of much longer term?
Yeah, Liz, maybe you say, right, when is our homework being marked a bit more strongly and positively? And I think you as a committee and how people judge us will be equally as important as that as well.
There's two parts to this. So there's the stuff that we're talking about today, which is sort of tangible things that we can actually drive, and we're intending to do that over the next couple of years to get this into the corners of the organisation. In addition to that, the service modernisation and transformation agenda plays a huge part in this, doesn't it? And some of the things that you mentioned around AI and the systems that we are operating on, some of our technology is legacy systems, and we need to get off those platforms to enable us to do lots of the things that we've talked about, identifying vulnerability, capturing the right data points, etc., etc. And that's a longer programme of investment that goes on for several years. So I don't think it's right for us to have a destination. And if we are, as a learning organisation, that is always going to continue. But I certainly think over the next 12 to 18 months we can deliver some tangible step changes in what we're doing as a department, both locally and at a system level. And then there's the second phase of that transformation, which enables some of this to happen without the human intervention, which is where we're really striving to be.
James,
I mean, that example we were talking about a minute ago of 4 months, the request was on the computer and nobody did anything about it. Is what's needed to put that right? That kind of it's not really about mental health training.
No, that's right. And these are the sort of early warning systems that, from my experience, would say actually there's been no activity on that, or there's some post that's not been actioned. Which on some of these systems we just don't have that technology to enable us to be able to pop that up to somebody and say actually this case needs looking at. So that is where we've got to sort of build that functionality as we go forward with the new platforms.
Perhaps I could add a bit to this and absolutely echo what the others have said, that there's a huge amount of investment going into service modernisation and AI in DWP, and I think I touched upon that earlier. I think what we want to do is to make life easier for the job coaches and those at the sharp end dealing with vulnerable people. We talked about data. A lot of what they need is data, but often it's rather labour to get the data. So what we're wanting to do is to use new methods, new ways, service modernisation and AI, to allow the work coaches particularly to have a better experience, and where they can, with the information they've got, more easily accessible, deal directly with customers, including vulnerable customers. So I think, as Liz quite rightly says, this is an ongoing, very important programme. There is no particular end date. It's a constant moving feast. But having said all that, what we want to do is to get to the point in our various AI projects, for example, where we reach proof of concept. Once we've reached proof of concept, where we know something works and is going to be a real game changer for those working at the front end, then we can then accelerate and roll that out. And that, I think, will be a real game changer. But I wouldn't want to be in a position to give any time frame on that.
Okay, well, thank you, Ministers, very much indeed. Thank you to your colleagues as well for the helpful information you've given to us. That concludes our questions to you and concludes our meeting. Order.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.